Hey guys, tonight we're stepping through a portal you can't close, straight into the mud, smoke, and shadows of medieval Europe. You're waking up on a straw mattress that crackles beneath you, and the air smells like wet wool, animal dung, and something vaguely rotten you can't identify. Your back aches, your stomach growls. Through a gap in the wooden shutters, pale dawn light filters in, and you hear a rooster screaming its morning alarm. This isn't a vacation. This is your life now. And the story may solve mysteries you never had an explanation for, like why your ancestors fought so hard to build a world you take for granted. So, before you explore the story with me, please take a moment to help me subscribe to the channel, like and share this video, or maybe leave a comment below, but make sure you do it when you really like what I bring to you. Tell me where you're watching from tonight, or what part of history keeps you up at night. I love hearing from you. Now, let's keep the lights as soft as possible. Turn on the fan for a gentle sound to help the story feel more emotional, and let's embark on tonight's journey together. You blink against the dim light and sit up. The ceiling is low, rough-hewn beams blackened by years of hearth smoke. You're in a one-room cottage, no bigger than a modern garage, and you're sharing it with at least 6 other people. A couple snores near the far wall. 2 children sleep curled together on a pile of rags. An old woman mutters in her sleep, her breath rattling in her chest like dice in a cup. The air is thick, warm from bodies pressed together, and you realise with a sinking feeling that there's no bathroom. No running water, no electricity, no phone to Google. How did medieval people survive? You swing your legs off the straw pallet and your bare feet touch a floor of packed earth. It's cold, damp, slightly gritty. You stand wobbling, and your modern clothes are gone, replaced by a rough linen tunic that scratches your skin like burlap dipped in sand. Your jeans, your sneakers, your soft cotton, everything vanished. You're dressed like a peasant because, congratulations, you are one. Welcome to the bottom rung of the feudal ladder, where 90% of Europe lives and dies without ever owning a single thing of value. Outside, a pig grunts somewhere close. Chickens cluck and fuss. You push open the wooden door, it's crooked on leather hinges and scrapes against the floor, and step into a world that assaults your senses. The smell hits you first. Manure, wet thatch, smoke, and the sour tang of unwashed bodies. The village around you is a cluster of sagging cottages, their roofs moss-covered and crooked like the hunched backs of old men. Smoke rises from a dozen chimneys, or rather, from holes in the roofs, because actual chimneys are a luxury most people here don't have. The streets aren't paved. They're rivers of mud mixed with animal waste, food scraps, and things you absolutely don't want to identify. You take one step and your bare foot sinks into something warm and squishy. You gag. A chicken pecks at your toes, utterly indifferent to your horror. A woman walks past carrying a wooden bucket that sloshes with murky water. She doesn't look at you. Her face is lined deep. Her teeth are brown stumps where they exist at all. And she's probably 30 years old. In medieval Europe, 30 is middle-aged. If you make it to 50, you're a living legend. Historians still argue whether the average life expectancy was truly as low as 35, or if catastrophic infant mortality skews the numbers. But either way, your odds of seeing retirement age are about as good as winning the lottery, except lotteries don't exist yet. And neither does the concept of retirement. You glance around, desperately searching for something familiar. A store, a hospital, a police officer, a vending machine, anything. But there's nothing. Just mud, animals, and exhausted people who've already been awake for hours. The sun is barely up, and the workday has already started. No one's scrolling their phone because phones won't exist for another 600 years. No one's grabbing coffee because coffee hasn't reached Europe yet. You're stuck with weak ale or water that'll probably kill you. They're hauling water from the well, feeding scrawny livestock, and preparing for another day of grinding labour that will break their bodies before they turn 40. You feel panic rising in your chest like floodwater. How do you survive here? You don't know how to plough a field with an ox that doesn't want to cooperate. You don't know how to spin wool, churn butter, or slaughter a chicken without fainting. You don't know which mushrooms are edible and which will have you convulsing in the dirt within an hour. You can't read the few books that exist because they're all in Latin or Old French. And even if you miraculously could, you'd never see one. Books are rarer than gold and locked away in monastery libraries where common people aren't allowed. You have no money, no friends, no family who remembers you. You're alone in a time that doesn't care whether you live or die. And frankly, your death would barely register as a footnote. And here's the kicker. You can't leave. There's no train station, no airport, no Uber waiting around the corner. Most people in this village will never travel more than 10 miles from where they were born. The world beyond is massive and unmapped, full of bandits who'll slit your throat for your shoes, wolves that hunt in packs, and diseases that don't even have names yet. Even if you started walking with some vague plan to reach a city, where would you go? Cities are death traps, overcrowded warrens where the smell alone could knock you unconscious, and plague moves through the population like wildfire through dry grass. The roads are controlled by local lords who'll rob you, conscript you into their armies, or just kill you for sport if they're bored. The forests are dark and deep, and people whisper about things that live in them, not just animals, other things the priests warn about on Sundays. You take a shaky breath. The smell of wood smoke and rot fills your lungs, and you cough. This is real. This is happening. And as the sun climbs higher, casting weak golden light over the muddy village, you realise the only way to survive the next week is to learn, fast, how to be medieval. No shortcuts, no life hacks, no Googling medieval survival tips. Just you, the mud, and a world that's already forgotten how to be kind, if it ever knew in the first place. A bell rings in the distance, probably from the manor house or the village church. The sound is dull, insistent, metal on metal. It's a summons. Time to work. Time to bow your head. Time to pray to saints you've never heard of. And if you don't respond, well, you'll find out soon enough what happens to people who don't fall in line. Spoiler, it's not a polite warning or a written citation. It's public humiliation at best, a flogging at worst, and possibly something much darker if the Lord is in a bad mood. You watch as villagers emerge from their hovels like ants from a disturbed nest. They move slowly, joints stiff from sleeping on straw, faces blank with exhaustion that never quite goes away. A man leads an ox by a rope. A girl, maybe 9 years old, carries a baby on her hip while balancing a basket on her head. No one smiles. No one talks much. They just move. Automatons powered by hunger and fear, performing the same tasks their parents did and their children will do until the cycle finally, mercifully breaks. You're about to learn that survival in medieval times isn't about strength or smarts or having watched a lot of survival documentaries. It's about obedience, bowing to the Lord, the priest, the guild master, your father, your husband, anyone with even a scrap more power than you. It's about endurance, working until your hands bleed, eating food that tastes like sadness, and accepting that pain is just part of existence. And it's about luck, the random chance that you won't catch typhus, that the harvest won't fail, that the soldiers won't burn your village for taxes you can't pay right now. Standing in the mud with chicken dung between your toes, you're fresh out of all three. The first thing you need to do is relieve yourself. And that's when the true horror of medieval hygiene reveals itself. You look around for a bathroom, a porta potty, even an outhouse with a door. Nothing. The woman who passed you earlier is now squatting behind her cottage, skirts hiked up, doing her business in full view of anyone who cares to look. No one does. This is normal. You feel your modern sensibilities crumbling like stale bread. You spot what looks like a communal pit at the edge of the village. A cesspit, basically, where everyone dumps their waste. The smell radiating from it is so powerful it makes your eyes water from 20 feet away. You approach cautiously, breathing through your mouth, which is a mistake because now you can taste it. The pit is a churning soup of human and animal excrement, rotting food, and things you can't identify and don't want to. Flies swarm in thick black clouds. There's no toilet paper, no leaves that look particularly soft. Just your hand and maybe a nearby puddle of questionable water to rinse with afterward. You do what you have to do, gagging the entire time, and when you're finished, you understand something fundamental. Medieval people didn't avoid bathing because they were stupid or lazy. They avoided it because water was dangerous, soap was expensive, and privacy didn't exist. You stumble away from the pit, your hand still feeling unclean no matter how much you rub it on your tunic, and you wonder how long until you stop noticing the smell. Spoiler, about 3 days. The human nose is remarkably adaptable, which is both a blessing and a curse. Back at the cottage, you're expected to help with morning tasks. An older man, maybe your father in this scenario, though he looks ancient and is probably 40, grunts at you and points toward a wooden bucket. You're on water duty. The village well is at the centre of the settlement, surrounded by mud that's been churned into a slick, treacherous mess by hundreds of feet. You join a line of women and children, all waiting their turn. No one speaks to you. You're new, strange, and in medieval villages, strangers are viewed with the same warmth as a plague rat. When your turn comes, you lower the bucket into darkness and haul it up. The water is cloudy, greyish. With things floating in it you choose not to examine closely. This is your drinking water, your cooking water, your everything water. A girl next to you, maybe 12, catches you staring at the bucket's contents and laughs, the first sound of amusement you've heard all morning. First time seeing the well, she asks in a dialect you barely understand. You nod. She shrugs. Don't drink it straight. The ale's safer. She's right. Medieval people, even children, drank weak beer or ale for breakfast, lunch, and dinner because the fermentation process killed most of the bacteria that made water deadly. Historians still debate exactly how contaminated medieval water sources were, but the fact that entire populations chose alcohol over water tells you everything you need to know. You carry the bucket back, sloshing half of it onto your feet, which are now caked in mud and other substances. Your modern brain screams for a shower, but showers won't be invented for centuries. Baths exist, theoretically, but they're rare, communal, and often shared by multiple people using the same water. The wealthy might bathe a few times a year. Peasants, maybe once or twice in a lifetime. And usually only before major events like weddings or church holidays. The rest of the time, you just smell. Everyone does. It's the great equalizer. Inside the cottage, there's no sink, no running water. The bucket you hauled sits in the corner, and people dip cups into it throughout the day. You watch someone drink from it and resist the urge to scream about bacteria, parasites, and dysentery. They don't know what bacteria are. Germ theory won't be discovered for another 500 years. If you get sick, people will blame bad air, an imbalance of humours, or God's punishment for sin. They'll never think to boil the water. You're handed a rag, calling it a towel would be generous, and told to wipe your face. The rag is stiff with dried grime and smells like mildew. You dab at your cheeks, trying not to think about how many other faces have used this same cloth. Your skin already feels itchy. Your hair, usually washed every day or two, now hangs limp and greasy. You run your fingers through it and feel grit. Actual grit, dirt, ash, probably lice eggs. Within a week, you'll have lice. Everyone does. Scratching becomes a constant background activity, like breathing. The concept of personal hygiene, as you know it, simply doesn't exist. Toothbrushes, not invented. People clean their teeth by rubbing them with cloth or chewing on twigs, if they bother at all. Toothpaste? Laughable. Some people use crushed herbs or charcoal, but most just accept that their teeth will rot, turn black, and eventually fall out. By age 30, having a full set of teeth marks you as either incredibly lucky or wealthy enough to afford a diet that doesn't destroy your mouth. Dental pain is so common that people just live with it. Constant throbbing agony that never quite goes away, until an infection finally kills them, or a barber yanks the tooth out with pliers and no anaesthetic. Deodorant won't exist for another 700 years, so everyone's natural musk mingles into a collective fog of body odour that hangs over the village like a curse. You smell yourself and nearly weep. 24 hours ago, you showered with scented soap, used conditioner, applied deodorant, maybe even spritzed on cologne. Now you smell like a wet dog that rolled in compost. And you're one of the cleaner ones. Women have it worse during menstruation. They use rags that get washed occasionally in cold water and reused, or sometimes just wadded up moss and grass. Yeast infections, urinary tract infections, and mystery rashes are constant companions. There's no Midol, no heating pads, just pain, inconvenience, and the expectation that you'll work through it anyway because no one cares about your discomfort. You notice people scratching constantly. Heads, arms, groins, fleas, lice, bedbugs, and mites are as common as breathing. Your straw mattress is probably hosting thousands of insects right now, feasting on you while you sleep. You'll wake up covered in bites, red welts that itch so badly you'll scratch until you bleed, which will then get infected because your hands are filthy and so is everything else. Minor infections that would clear up with Neosporin in your time become serious problems here. People die from infected scratches. It's mundane and terrifying. The old woman in the corner coughs, a wet, rattling sound, and spits into the floor. No one reacts. Tuberculosis, probably, or just chronic respiratory problems from sleeping in smoke-filled rooms for decades. Sharing close quarters with sick people is unavoidable. If someone has a contagious disease, you're getting it. There's no quarantine, no isolation, no sick days. You work until you physically can't, and then you lie in the corner hoping you don't die while everyone steps over you. You look at your hands, already dirty again despite washing them in the bucket, and realise you'll never feel truly clean here. The grime becomes part of you, worked into the creases of your skin, under your nails, in the roots of your hair. Medieval people weren't dirtier because they were primitive. They were dirty because staying clean required resources they didn't have. Clean water, soap made from animal fat and lye, privacy, time, and most importantly, the knowledge that cleanliness prevented disease. Without that knowledge, why waste precious energy on something that seemed purely cosmetic? You sit on a wooden stool exhausted and it's barely sunrise. Your body already aches from the straw bed. Your stomach churns from the sight of that water bucket. Your skin crawls with imagined bugs. And you haven't even had breakfast yet. The day stretches ahead like a prison sentence. And you're only on hour 2 of week 1. If hygiene is this bad. You think, what else are you getting wrong? Turns out, pretty much everything. Your stomach growls loud enough that the old woman glances at you with rheumy eyes. You're starving. In your time, breakfast might mean eggs, toast, coffee, maybe a smoothie if you're feeling healthy. Here, breakfast is whatever didn't get eaten yesterday. and the standards are appallingly low. The woman shuffles to the hearth, a circle of stones in the centre of the room with a small fire that never quite goes out, and stirs a pot that's been hanging there all night. She ladles something grey and lumpy into a wooden bowl and hands it to you without ceremony. You stare into the bowl. It's pottage, a thick porridge made from grain, probably barley or oats, boiled with water until it achieves the consistency of wallpaper paste. There's no salt, no butter, no sugar, definitely no cinnamon or brown sugar like the oatmeal you're used to, just grain and water, maybe with some onion or cabbage thrown in if you're lucky. You dip a wooden spoon into the grey sludge and bring it to your mouth. It tastes like absolutely nothing, but with an aftertaste of smoke and faint bitterness. You force yourself to swallow. This is breakfast. This is also lunch and dinner for the rest of your life, if you stay here. Medieval peasant diets were monotonous to the point of psychological torture. Bread and pottage, pottage and bread, day after day, month after month, year after year. Meat was a luxury reserved for feast days and the wealthy. You might see chicken or pork a few times a year, beef almost never. Fish was more common if you lived near water, but it was usually salted or dried into something resembling leather, and you'd soak it for hours just to make it chewable. Fresh vegetables existed in summer: onions, cabbage, turnips, leeks, but nothing exotic. No tomatoes, no potatoes, no corn. Those are in the Americas, which Europeans haven't discovered yet, and won't for another few centuries depending on when exactly you've landed. The bread sitting on the table looks more like a weapon than food. It's dark, dense, and so hard you could probably kill someone with it. This is maslin bread, made from a mixture of wheat and rye, though peasants often got bread made from barley, oats, or even peas and beans ground into flour. The wealthy ate white bread made from refined wheat flour. You get brown bread so coarse it's full of grit, literally. Tiny stones from the grinding process that will wear down your teeth over the years. You gnaw on a corner and your jaw aches from the effort. It tastes sour, yeasty, and vaguely mouldy. You check for spots of green or black mould and find some, but everyone else is eating it anyway, so you do too. Ergot poisoning from mouldy grain is a real danger, causing hallucinations, convulsions, and gangrene. But you won't know if you've been poisoned until your fingers start turning black. Someone hands you a cup. Finally. You think, water. But it's not water, it's small beer. Weak ale with barely any alcohol content. Consumed by everyone including children because it's safer than the alternative. You sip it. It's flat, slightly sour, room temperature, and tastes like liquid bread, because that's essentially what it is. Historians still argue whether medieval people understood the connection between beer brewing and water safety, or if they just preferred beer culturally. But either way, you're drinking beer for breakfast, and you'll drink it for every meal going forward. Your liver is going to hate you. The calories you're consuming are barely enough to sustain you. Peasants lived on somewhere between 2,000 and 2,500 calories per day during good times, but those calories came almost entirely from grain. Protein was scarce. Vitamins were a concept no one understood. Scurvy, rickets, anemia, all common. You'll notice people around you are shorter than modern humans, with bowed legs and bad teeth. Their growth stunted by childhood malnutrition. The average medieval man stood about 5'7". Women were shorter. Everyone looked older than their years because their bodies were worn down by relentless physical labour and inadequate nutrition. You watch a child, maybe 5 years old, gnaw on a chunk of bread with the focused intensity of someone who's genuinely hungry. Not I skipped lunch hungry. Genuinely, belly-achingly hungry. Hunger is the baseline state of existence for most people here. You're never quite full. There's always a hollow feeling in your stomach, a gnawing reminder that food is scarce and survival is precarious. One bad harvest and the entire village starves. It's that simple. The concept of meals as social, enjoyable experiences doesn't really exist at this level of society. You eat to survive. Food is fuel, nothing more. No one talks about flavour profiles or presentation. The wealthy have spices, pepper, cinnamon, cloves imported from Asia at staggering cost. But you'll never taste them. Your food is beige, boring, and barely edible. The monotony is soul-crushing. Imagine eating the same flavourless porridge for breakfast, stale bread for lunch, and watery vegetable soup for dinner, every single day, forever. No pizza, no chocolate, no coffee, no fruit unless it's growing season, and even then it's small, sour, and nothing like the genetically perfected produce you're used to. You finish your pottage and you're still hungry. There's no second helping. Food is rationed carefully because there isn't enough to go around. You eye the bread again, but the old woman shakes her head. That bread needs to last. You'll get another piece at midday. Maybe. If you're good, if you work hard, food is leverage, control, a tool used to keep you compliant. Someone mentions cheese, and your hopes rise. Cheese sounds good right now, familiar even, but the cheese here is hard as a rock, made from sheep or goat milk, aged until it's nearly inedible, and tastes aggressively salty with a funky undertone that makes you gag. It keeps for months without refrigeration, which is the point, but it's not the creamy brie or sharp cheddar you're imagining. It's survival food, barely palatable, consumed only because the alternative is starvation. Fruits are a rare treat, apples, pears and berries in season, but they're smaller, harder, more tart than you're used to. Most fruit gets turned into cider or perry because, again, fermentation makes things safer and helps preserve the harvest. Fresh fruit is eaten immediately because it rots within days. No refrigeration means nothing keeps, meat spoils, milk sours, bread moulds. You eat what's available right now or you lose it, which is why medieval people feasted extravagantly when food was plentiful and starved when it wasn't. There was no middle ground. You learn that salt is incredibly valuable, used to preserve meat and fish. It's taxed heavily and sometimes used as currency. Sugar exists, but it's so expensive that only royalty and the very wealthy can afford it. Honey is the common sweetener, and even that's not something you'll encounter often. Most of your food will be savoury at best, bland at worst, and occasionally outright disgusting. The worst part isn't the lack of variety or flavour, it's the constant, nagging hunger that never quite goes away, and the knowledge that this is a good day. The harvest was decent. No one's starving yet. Winter is still months away, but you can see the fear in people's eyes when they look at the stores of grain, counting in their heads, calculating whether there's enough to make it through to spring. Often there isn't, and when the food runs out, people eat bark, grass, anything. They slaughter their breeding animals, which means no animals next year. They die quietly in their cottages, too weak to even cry out. You push the empty bowl away and your stomach gurgles in protest. This is breakfast in medieval times, joyless, minimal, and flavoured with existential dread. And you've got 2 more meals just like it ahead of you today. After your disappointing breakfast, you're told to get dressed properly for the day's work. You look down at your tunic, confused. You thought you were already dressed. The older man shakes his head and points to a pile of fabric in the corner. Turns out medieval clothing is layered, complicated, and universally uncomfortable in ways you never imagined. First comes the under-tunic, a long linen shirt that reaches your knees. Linen is the only fabric that touches your skin because wool, the primary textile of medieval Europe, is so scratchy it would shred your skin raw within hours. You pull the linen shift over your head and immediately feel how coarse it is. This isn't the soft, pre-washed linen you might buy at a boutique. This is rough, hand-woven fabric that has been used for months, maybe years, without a proper washing. It smells like the person who wore it before you. Sweat, smoke, and something vaguely fungal. You gag a little but pull it on anyway. Next comes the wool tunic, pulled over the linen. Wool is everything in medieval Europe. Clothing, blankets, trade goods, tax payments. England's economy literally runs on sheep. But this wool isn't soft merino. It's thick, oily, and scratchy even through the linen underlayer. The lanolin hasn't been fully washed out, which actually helps waterproof the fabric. But it also means you smell like wet sheep. The tunic hangs loose and shapeless, cinched at the waist with a rope belt. Fashion isn't a concern, function barely is. You just need to be covered. If you're male, you get brays, basically medieval underwear that looks like baggy shorts tied at the waist and knees. They're made of linen and they're the only thing between you and total exposure because medieval people didn't have elastic waistbands. If you're female, you skip the brays and just wear multiple layers of underskirts beneath your outer dress. All of it wool, all of it heavy, all of it scratchy. Women also wrap their hair completely. Unmarried girls might show some hair, but married women cover everything with a linen wimple or veil. Showing your hair as a married woman is scandalous, possibly immoral. You don't make the rules, you just suffer under them. Shoes are your next nightmare. If you're lucky, you have wooden clogs or leather shoes so thin and poorly made they'll fall apart within months. Most peasants go barefoot except in winter, and even then, their shoes are stuffed with straw for insulation. The pair you're given are leather, barely, more like animal hide roughly stitched together with no left or right foot distinction. They're stiff, they pinch, and they offer zero arch support. Your modern feet, accustomed to cushioned sneakers, immediately blister. Within a day, you'll have open sores on your heels. Within a week, walking will be agony. You notice everyone's clothes are roughly the same colour, brownish, greyish, mud-toned. That's because dyes are expensive. Bright colours like red, blue, and purple are for the wealthy. Peasants wear undyed wool or fabric dyed with cheap local plants that produce muddy browns and yellows. Your clothing marks your status instantly. One glance and everyone knows you're nobody, and you'll stay nobody until you die. Here's the real horror. You're not going to wash these clothes. Maybe once a month if you're fastidious, but more likely once every few months, or even less. Water is scarce and hauling it is exhausting. Soap is expensive, made from animal fat and wood ash lye. It's harsh enough to strip skin. Most people just don't bother. You wear your clothes day after day, sleeping in them, working in them, sweating in them, until they're so stiff with grime they could stand up on their own. The wealthy can afford multiple outfits and laundresses. You get one tunic and you wear it until it literally falls apart. The itching starts almost immediately. The wool irritates your skin. The linen chafes where you sweat. And then there are the bugs. Your clothes are infested, fleas, lice, bed bugs, all living in the seams and folds, breeding happily in the warmth of your body. You scratch your armpit and feel something move. You want to scream, but everyone around you is scratching too. Absently, like it's just part of life. Because it is. Historians still debate exactly how infested medieval clothing was. But written accounts mention delousing as a common social activity, like modern people scrolling their phones together. Friends and family would pick lice out of each other's hair and clothes, crushing them between thumbnails. It was bonding time. You're also sweating already, and it's barely mid-morning. Medieval clothing doesn't breathe well. Layer upon layer of wool and linen traps heat and moisture against your skin. In summer, you'll roast. In winter, you'll freeze because these clothes aren't warm enough for genuinely cold weather. There's no thermostat to adjust, no changing into shorts or putting on a jacket. You own what you're wearing and maybe one other set of clothes if you're fortunate. That's it. When winter comes, you'll just pile on more layers. Sleep in your clothes and huddle near the fire hoping you don't freeze to death. The concept of personal style doesn't exist at your level. You can't choose your clothes, you can't express yourself through fashion. Everyone looks the same, shapeless, muddy, and miserable. The only variation comes from necessity. A shepherd might have a hooded cloak, a blacksmith might have a leather apron, but it's all functional, all utilitarian, and all deeply, profoundly uncomfortable. Women have it particularly rough. Their dresses are long, heavy, and drag through mud and filth constantly. The hems are permanently stained and rotting. Lifting your skirts to walk reveals your legs, which is immodest, so you just let the fabric drag. Your arms are covered always, showing bare arms is scandalous. Your neck is covered, in summer. You're overheating and there's nothing you can do about it. Modesty trumps comfort every single time. Undergarments barely exist as you know them. No bras, women wrap their chests with cloth bands or just let everything move freely under their dresses, which is uncomfortable during physical labour. No modern underwear with elastic and cotton, just rough linen that bunches, chafes, and doesn't stay in place. Personal hygiene in these conditions is nearly impossible. You can't easily remove layers to wash yourself. You can't change your underwear daily. You just exist in your own filth. You adjust your tunic for the 100th time, trying to find a position where the wool doesn't scratch quite as badly. It doesn't work. This is your life now. Constant, low-level physical discomfort from the clothes you're wearing. Your skin develops rashes. You smell like sheep and sweat. Your scalp itches from lice eggs. Your feet throb in the ill-fitting shoes. And the worst part, these are your good clothes, your everyday work clothes. If you had church clothes, they'd be slightly less filthy but just as uncomfortable. If you had winter clothes, they'd be heavier but just as scratchy. There's no escape from the itching, the sweating, the stinking, the constant awareness of your own body's discomfort. Modern clothing is designed for comfort, fit, breathability, and ease of care. Medieval clothing is designed to barely keep you covered and to last as long as possible despite brutal conditions and zero maintenance. You look around at the other villagers, all dressed identically in shapeless tunics and mud-stained layers, and you understand something profound. These people aren't wearing clothes, they're wearing endurance tests, and you're failing already. The sun is barely clearing the horizon when you're handed a wooden tool you don't recognise and told to follow the others to the fields. Your day of actual work is beginning, and your body, soft from modern life, used to sitting in chairs and maybe hitting the gym twice a week, is about to be destroyed in ways you never thought possible. The fields stretch out in long, narrow strips, each one belonging to a different family, but all of them owned by the lord whose manor house looms on the distant hill. You don't own this land. You'll never own this land. You work it in exchange for protection, theoretical protection from bandits and invaders, and the privilege of not being killed. Welcome to feudalism, where you're not technically a slave, but you're not exactly free either. You're a serf bound to this land, forbidden from leaving without permission you'll never receive. The tool in your hands is a wooden plough, and you're expected to help guide it while an ox, bony, stubborn, and mean-spirited, pulls it through soil that hasn't been properly tilled in years. The ox doesn't want to cooperate. You don't know how to make it cooperate. The animal handler, a man with forearms like tree trunks, yells at you in dialect you barely understand and shoves you toward the plough handles. You grab them and immediately feel splinters dig into your palms. The plough lurches forward as the ox moves, and you stumble, nearly falling face first into the furrow. Ploughing is back-breaking labour that requires strength, skill, and experience you don't have. You're supposed to keep the plough steady, at the right depth, moving in a straight line while fighting against rocks, roots, and the sheer resistance of earth that doesn't want to be turned. Your arms shake within minutes. Your shoulders scream. Your back, oh, Your back feels like someone's driving hot nails into your spine. You've been working for maybe 20 minutes and you want to quit. But there's no quitting. The field must be ploughed. The seed must be planted. If it isn't, everyone starves, including you. The work continues for hours. The sun climbs higher and the temperature rises. You're sweating through your layers of wool and linen, and the fabric clings to your skin like a wet blanket. There's no water break, no shade, no supervisor asking if you need a moment. You work until the row is finished, and then you start another row, and another. The man with the ox doesn't speak to you except to bark corrections when you mess up, which is constantly around you. Others are doing equally brutal work. Women and children are in the fields pulling weeds by hand. Their backs bent for hours, fingers bloody from thorns and rough stalks. Others are broadcasting seed, walking the ploughed furrows and scattering grain by hand, praying that birds don't eat it all before it germinates. Still others are hauling stones, clearing debris, or spreading manure as fertilizer. Everyone works. Children as young as 5 or 6 have tasks. The elderly work until they physically can't, and then they're quietly left to die because there's no retirement, no pension, no social safety net. You produce or you perish. By midday, you're destroyed. Your hands are blistered and bleeding. Your back feels permanently bent. Your legs tremble from exhaustion. You've never been this tired in your life, and you're not even halfway through the workday. Medieval peasants worked from sunrise to sunset during planting and harvest seasons, easily 12 to 14 hours of brutal physical labour. In winter, the days were shorter, but the work didn't stop. There was always something to maintain, repair or prepare. You collapse at the edge of the field when the bells ring for the midday break. Someone hands you a piece of bread, the same hard, gritty bread from breakfast, and a wooden cup of weak ale. This is lunch. You gnaw on the bread, barely tasting it, and drain the ale in desperate gulps. Your body is screaming for protein, for electrolytes, for a cold shower and a soft bed. You get stale grain and warm beer. Welcome to medieval meal planning. The break lasts maybe 30 minutes, just long enough for your muscles to stiffen, and then you're back at it. The afternoon is worse than the morning because you're already exhausted. Every movement hurts. Your blisters have burst and your palms are raw meat. You grip the plough handles anyway because stopping isn't an option. The ox plods forward and you follow, a stumbling zombie operating on willpower alone. Historians still argue about exactly how many hours medieval peasants worked annually. Some suggest they had more feast days and rest periods than modern workers. Others point to the relentless seasonal demands that left no room for rest. The truth is probably somewhere in the middle, but right now, experiencing it firsthand, it feels endless. This isn't a job you clock out of. This is survival. Every seed planted is a meal next winter. Every field ploughed is the difference between life and starvation. You notice other people working the Lord's fields too, the domain, the land he keeps for himself, several days a week. You're required to work the Lord's land for free. It's called corvée labour, and it's not optional. You plough his fields, harvest his crops, maintain his property, all while your own fields sit waiting. If your crops fail because you are too busy working for the Lord, that's your problem. You still owe him rent in grain, chickens, or whatever else he demands. The system is designed to keep you trapped in perpetual poverty and exhaustion. Around mid-afternoon, someone collapses. A man, maybe 50 but looking 70, just drops in the field. People glance at him but keep working. Someone drags him to the shade and pours water on his face. He doesn't get up. Heat stroke, probably, or a heart attack, or just exhaustion and age catching up. No one calls an ambulance because ambulances won't exist for centuries. No one performs CPR. They just leave him there and hope he recovers. If he doesn't, They'll bury him tomorrow and divide his workload among his family. Life is cheap here. Death is common. You keep ploughing, your mind starts to drift as your body goes numb. You think about your modern job, sitting at a desk, typing on a keyboard, maybe standing for meetings. It seemed hard at the time. You complained about being tired. You thought you understood physical labour because you went to the gym. You knew nothing. This is labour that breaks bodies permanently. Medieval skeletons show evidence of severe arthritis, spinal damage, and repetitive stress injuries that would be your career ending today. Here, you just work through the pain until your body gives out completely. The sun finally begins its descent and you hear the church bell ring for vespers. Work stops. You drop the plough handles and nearly sob with relief. Your hands won't straighten. Your back is locked in a bent position. You shuffle toward the village like an old man, and you're maybe 30 years old. Around you, actual old men, 45, 50, move with the permanent stoop of people whose spines have been compressed by decades of this labour. You make it back to the cottage and collapse on the straw mattress. Every muscle in your body is screaming. You smell like ox, manure and sweat. Your hands are bloody. Your face is sunburned, your feet are blistered from the terrible shoes. And tomorrow, you'll do it all again. And the day after that, and every day for the rest of your life. With no vacation days, no weekends, no retirement plan. Just work until you die. Probably in your 40s. Probably in this same field. Probably unmourned except by family who are too exhausted to grieve properly. This is day 1. You have 6 more to survive. And honestly, you're not sure you'll make it. You wake the next morning, if you can call what you experience sleep, and every muscle in your body has solidified into concrete. Moving hurts, breathing hurts, existing hurts. You groan and try to sit up, and that's when you hear the horn. Not a gentle alarm, but a long, brassy blast that echoes across the village like a summons from hell itself. Everyone around you scrambles to their feet. Sudden panic in their movements. Something's wrong. The older man grabs your arm with surprising strength and pulls you outside. The entire village is gathering in the muddy square, and that's when you see them. Mounted soldiers wearing the Lord's colours, sitting atop horses that look better fed than any human you've seen here. The lead rider unfurls a parchment and begins reading in a voice that expects obedience. You're being called to work the Lord's domain today. Not asked. Called. And there's a new tax, an additional portion of your grain due before harvest. This is the reality of feudal life that history books gloss over. You don't just owe your lord rent and labour. You owe him everything. He owns the mill where you grind grain, and you must pay to use it. He owns the oven where you bake bread, and you must pay to use that too. He owns the bridge you cross, the road you travel, the forest where you might hunt, except you can't hunt because all game belongs to him, and poaching means losing a hand or worse. You're nickeled and dimed at every turn, except instead of nickels it's grain you can't spare, chickens you need for eggs, and days of labour that leave your own fields neglected. The Lord himself rarely appears. He's off at court or at war or managing his other properties. Instead, you deal with his steward, a man with cold eyes and a ledger who tracks every chicken, every bushel, every day of work you owe. The steward walks through the village now, pointing at people seemingly at random. You're chosen. 3 days of work on the manor house starting immediately. Your own planting will have to wait. You want to protest, but the words die in your throat when you see the soldiers' hands resting casually on their sword hilts. These aren't policemen bound by laws and oversight. These are armed men who answer only to the Lord. And if you resist, they can beat you, fine you, imprison you, or kill you with minimal consequences. There's no appeals process, no lawyer to call, no rights to invoke. You're a peasant. You have no rights. You have obligations. The walk to the manor house takes an hour, and with every step you see the wealth disparity that defines medieval society. The manor sits on a hill, surrounded by stone walls. It's not a castle, those are for nobility, but it's massive compared to your hovel. Multiple rooms, glass windows, a chimney, actual furniture. The lord and his family live like kings compared to you, and they extract that lifestyle directly from your suffering. Your job for the next 3 days is to repair the manor's defensive wall. You haul stones that weigh more than you do, mix mortar with your bare hands until the lime burns your skin, and stack rocks under the supervision of a mason who hits you with a stick when you're too slow. There's no payment. This is corvée labour, free work you owe simply for existing on the Lord's land. The medieval social contract is brutally simple. The Lord provides protection and justice. You provide everything else. Except the protection is theoretical. When bandits raided last year, you hear this story from another worker, the Lord's soldiers protected the manor house and let the village burn. When a dispute arose between 2 peasants over a stolen pig, the Lord's justice meant both men were fined and the pig was confiscated. The system isn't designed to help you, it's designed to extract maximum value from your labour while keeping you too poor and exhausted to resist. You work alongside others who whisper when the overseers aren't listening. They talk about the taxes, the labour demands, the casual cruelties. A woman mentions that her husband spoke against the Lord's new tax and was put in the stocks for a day, locked in a wooden frame in the village square where people threw rotten food and worse at him. A man says his brother tried to run away and was caught. They branded him on the face so everyone would know he was a runaway serf. Historians still debate exactly how bound serfs were to the land, whether they could leave with permission, whether some had more freedom than others. But the stories you're hearing suggest that leaving wasn't really an option unless you wanted to risk your life. Lunchtime brings the same bread and ale, but here at the manor you see what the Lord's household eats. Through an open window you glimpse white bread, roasted meat, wine in glass cups. The smell makes your mouth water and your stomach ache with hunger that goes beyond physical. It's the hunger of knowing that some people feast while you starve, that the grain you harvested with bleeding hands is being turned into luxury meals you'll never taste. The afternoon brings a new horror. The Lord's bailiff arrives to settle a dispute. 2 peasants are accused of stealing firewood from the Lord's forest. Firewood. Dead wood lying on the ground. But the forest belongs to the Lord, and everything in it, every stick, every mushroom, every rabbit is his property. The accused men kneel in the mud, pleading. The bailiff barely listens. He renders judgment, a fine of 2 chickens each, plus a day in the stocks. The men protest. They need those chickens for eggs, for breeding. Without them, their families might starve. The bailiff shrugs. Pay or face worse punishment. The soldiers move forward and the men sag in defeat. You watch this and understand that justice here isn't about fairness or truth. It's about power. The Lord has it. You don't. End of discussion. That night, back in your cottage, you learn there's a meeting. The village elders gather in hushed tones, and you're pulled into the circle because everyone must participate. They're discussing the new tax. Can the village pay it? Should they send someone to petition the Lord for mercy? The debate is tense because everyone knows the risks. Refuse the tax and soldiers come to enforce it violently. Petition the Lord and you might be punished for impertinence. Pay the tax and some families will starve. They decide to pay. They always decide to pay. Resistance is death. Compliance is slow death. You choose slow death and hope you survive another year. This is the calculus of medieval peasant life, and it's soul-crushing in ways physical labour never could be. You lie on your straw mattress that night, your body aching from hauling stones, your mind reeling from the injustice you witnessed. In your time, you complained about taxes, about government overreach, about feeling powerless. You had no idea what powerless really meant. Here, your property in all but name. Your lord owns your labour, your home, your future. He can demand anything and you must provide it. And if you complain too loudly, well, there are ways to silence complaints that don't leave lasting witnesses. Tomorrow you have one more day of manor work before you can return to your own fields. The planting season is slipping away. Your crops will be late, your harvest will be smaller, and you'll still owe the Lord the same amount of grain, which means less for you. The system is designed to keep you trapped, and it works perfectly. On your fourth morning, you wake with a fever, your head pounds, your throat feels like you've swallowed glass. And when you try to sit up, the room spins. You collapse back onto the straw, shivering despite the layers of wool wrapped around you. The old woman shuffles over, presses a hand to your forehead, and mutters something that sounds like a prayer. You're sick, and in medieval times, being sick is a death sentence wrapped in superstition and delivered with leeches. She brings you a cup of something that smells like boiled weeds and tastes worse. You're told to drink. It's a remedy passed down through generations. Herbs boiled in water. Maybe willow bark for pain. Maybe chamomile for fever. Maybe something completely useless or actively poisonous. There's no way to know because medical knowledge is a chaotic mix of ancient Greek theory, Christian mysticism, and folk wisdom accumulated through trial and error. Mostly error. Medieval medicine operates on the theory of humours, the belief that your body contains 4 fluids: blood, phlegm, yellow bile, and black bile. When these are balanced, you're healthy. When they're imbalanced, you're sick. The cure? Rebalance them through bloodletting, purging, or inducing vomiting. It's completely wrong, based on ideas from Galen and Hippocrates that are over 1,000 years old. But it's all anyone knows. Historians still debate whether medieval doctors genuinely believed in humoral theory, or if some suspected it was nonsense but had no better alternative. Your fever worsens throughout the day. By afternoon, someone decides you need professional help. They send for the barber surgeon, not a doctor, because doctors are university-educated men who treat nobility and charge fees you couldn't pay in 10 lifetimes. The barber surgeon is what peasants get. A man who cuts hair, pulls teeth, and performs basic surgery with tools he barely cleans between patients. He arrives carrying a leather satchel that smells like rust and old blood. He's younger than you expected, maybe 30, with stained hands and a confident manner that doesn't match his qualifications. He examines you briefly, checks your tongue, your eyes, feels your pulse, and announces that you have too much blood, an excess of the sanguine humour. The cure is obvious: bloodletting. Before you can protest, he's pulling out a small knife called a lancet. It's not sterile. Sterilization won't be understood for another 500 years. He doesn't wash his hands because the connection between dirty hands and infection won't be discovered until the 1800s. He simply rolls up your sleeve, finds a vein in your arm, and cuts. Blood flows into a wooden bowl while you watch, too weak and feverish to fight. The theory is that removing bad blood will rebalance your humours and cure your fever. The reality is that you're already weakened by illness, and losing blood makes everything worse. You feel yourself getting weaker, more lightheaded. But the barber surgeon nods with satisfaction. He's removed about a cup of blood, enough to make you dizzy but not enough to kill you immediately. He considers this a successful treatment. But wait, there's more. He reaches into his satchel and pulls out a jar full of leeches. Actual leeches. Black and writhing in murky water. He explains that leeches can draw out bad blood from specific areas. He places 3 of them on your neck and chest. You feel them latch on, their sucking mouths adhering to your skin, and you want to scream but you're too weak. The sensation is horrible. A pulling, draining feeling as the leeches engorge themselves on your blood. The barber surgeon sits back, pleased with his work. He'll return tomorrow to check on you. That'll be 2 chickens as payment. Please. Your family doesn't have 2 chickens to spare. But they'll find them somehow, because what choice do they have? You're dying. Or at least everyone thinks you are. And desperate people pay desperate prices. After he leaves, the old woman brings more herbal tea and makes the sign of the cross over you. She's hedging her bets, using folk remedies and Christian prayer simultaneously, because why not try everything? She suggests a pilgrimage to the local saint's shrine might help. Saint somebody or other is known for curing fevers. The shrine is a day's walk away and you can barely stand. But faith is powerful here. Miracles happen, or so people believe. And when medicine fails, which is almost always, divine intervention is the only hope left. You spend the next 2 days drifting in and out of consciousness. Your fever breaks on the 3rd day, not because of the bloodletting or leeches, but because your immune system, a concept no one here understands, finally fights off whatever infection you had. Probably a common cold or mild flu that would have cleared up on its own anyway. But everyone credits the barber surgeon's treatment. The leeches worked. The bloodletting balanced your humours. You're declared cured, which means you owe those 2 chickens plus a prayer of thanksgiving at church. You're lucky. Many people aren't. You hear stories that make your modern medical knowledge weep. A child with a broken arm had the bone set by a farmer with no training. It healed crooked and the child's arm is now useless. A woman with an abscessed tooth had it pulled without anaesthetic. She passed out from the pain and never woke up. A man with appendicitis died screaming over 3 days while priests prayed over him and monks consulted astrological charts to determine the best time for treatment. Surgery exists, but it's brutal and almost always fatal due to infection. There's no anaesthesia beyond alcohol, or, if you're incredibly lucky, a sponge soaked in opium and mandragora that might dull the pain or might just kill you. Surgeons operate with unwashed hands and reuse tools. They have no concept of internal anatomy beyond what they can see when someone's guts spill out. Post-operative care consists of prayers and hoping the wound doesn't rot. Common injuries are death sentences. A deep cut can lead to sepsis. A broken bone can get infected. Childbirth kills women constantly. Historians estimate that roughly 1 in 3 women died from complications related to pregnancy or childbirth over their lifetimes. There are no C-sections that the mother survives, no episiotomies, no epidurals, just midwives with dirty hands, prayers to Saint Margaret, and screaming that goes on for hours or days until the baby comes or the mother dies. Diseases you've never heard of are everywhere. Ergotism from mouldy grain causes hallucinations and gangrene. St. Anthony's fire makes your limbs turn black and fall off. The king's evil, scrofula, probably tuberculosis of the lymph nodes, is believed to be curable by the touch of royalty. People literally travel hundreds of miles to have a king touch their swollen necks. And when it doesn't work, they assume they weren't faithful enough. And then there are the plagues. Not just the Black Death, though that's the famous one. There are regular outbreaks of smallpox, measles, typhus, dysentery, and diseases that don't have names because they killed everyone before anyone could study them. When plague hits a village, there's no quarantine, no CDC, no contact tracing, just panic, prayer, and bodies piling up faster than you can bury them. You recover from your fever and stagger back to work, weak and dizzy, but alive. The barber surgeon's reputation is enhanced. He saved another life. The leeches are returned to their jar to be used on the next patient, and the lancet is wiped on his tunic and packed away. No one considers that maybe you survived despite the treatment rather than because of it. Your brush with medieval medicine leaves you shaken. Every cough, every ache, every minor pain now carries the weight of potential death. There's no safety net, no emergency room, no antibiotic, it's just bloodletting, prayer and hope. You're recovering from your illness, still weak but able to work. When you realise something unsettling, you're never alone. Privacy, as you understand it, simply doesn't exist. Every moment of your life is observed, commented on, and judged by someone. The concept of personal space is as foreign here as smartphones or democracy. You sleep in a one-room cottage with 6 other people. When you wake in the night to relieve yourself, stumble into a corner bucket because going outside in the dark risks stepping on something worse than mud, everyone hears you. When you change your clothes, which is rare, everyone sees you. There are no interior walls, no locked doors, no do not disturb signs. Your entire life unfolds in communal space where privacy is not just uncommon but actively suspicious. What are you hiding? Why do you need to be alone? Alone is where sin happens. The lack of privacy extends beyond your home. When you work in the fields, you're surrounded by other workers. When you eat, you're at a communal table. When you use the cesspit, it's in view of anyone passing by. Medieval people didn't have bathroom stalls or closed doors. Elimination was a public act, conducted with the same casual acceptance as eating or breathing. You squat over a pit or bucket while chickens peck nearby and neighbours walk past offering morning greetings. The embarrassment you feel is uniquely modern. Here, everyone does it. Everyone sees it. No one cares. Even your thoughts aren't private. The church has made sure of that. Every week, sometimes more often, you're required to attend confession. A priest sits in the dim church and you kneel before him and confess your sins. All of them. The priest asks questions. Have you had impure thoughts? Have you envied your neighbour? Have you worked on Sunday? Have you failed to tithe? The questions are invasive, probing into every corner of your mental and physical life. And you must answer honestly because lying in confession is itself a mortal sin that damns you to hell. The priest knows everything about you, your fears, your doubts, your secret resentments toward the Lord who works you to death. He knows when you fought with your spouse, when you thought unkind thoughts about your neighbours, when you've questioned church doctrine even silently in your own head. And he shares this information, not openly, but in subtle ways that let the community know who's sinful and who's righteous. Your reputation, your standing, your entire social existence depends on the priest's approval. Historians still debate how much power parish priests actually wielded versus how much people feared them, but the architecture of medieval society makes the priest's influence undeniable. He's the intermediary between you and God. He performs the sacraments that ensure your salvation. He can refuse you communion, which means social death and possibly actual death if the community shuns you. Cross him and your life becomes measurably worse. But it's not just the priest watching you. Your neighbours watch too. Medieval villages operate on collective surveillance that would make modern authoritarian states jealous. Everyone knows everyone's business. You can't have an argument with your spouse without the whole village hearing about it. You can't skip church without someone reporting it. You can't commit even minor transgressions, taking an extra loaf of bread, missing a day of corvée labour, without multiple witnesses who'll testify against you. This surveillance isn't malicious. Exactly. It's survival. In a world without police or formal law enforcement, the community polices itself. Reputation is everything. If you're known as a liar or a thief, you'll be excluded from cooperative labour, denied help in times of need, possibly driven out of the village entirely. So everyone watches everyone to maintain social order, and you learn quickly to conform. The lack of privacy extends even to marriage and sex. Your wedding night isn't private. In some regions, witnesses actually accompany the couple to ensure the marriage is consummated. This isn't voyeurism, it's legal necessity. An unconsummated marriage can be annulled, so proof of consummation matters, especially for nobility where inheritance is at stake. For peasants it's less formal but still observed. Your neighbours listen through thin walls. They comment the next morning, They know. Sex itself is heavily regulated by the church. You're not supposed to have sex on Sundays, holy days, during Lent, during Advent, during your wife's menstruation, during pregnancy, while nursing, or for pleasure rather than procreation. Well, that leaves maybe 40 days a year when sex is technically permitted. And even then it's supposed to be joyless, procreative, and in the missionary position only. Any deviation, oral sex, positions that suggest pleasure, contraception is sinful and must be confessed. Of course, people violate these rules constantly, but the rules exist. And when you confess your violations, the priest knows. And when the priest knows, somehow the community knows. Through whispers and meaningful glances and the subtle social mechanisms that make medieval villages function, women have it worse. Their bodies are public property in ways that make your skin crawl. Pregnancy is visible and commented on constantly. Childbirth happens at home with multiple witnesses, midwives, female relatives, neighbours, all crowded into the small space offering advice, prayer and judgment. Your pain is public. Your screaming is heard by everyone. If something goes wrong, the entire village knows within hours. Even menstruation isn't private. You can't discreetly buy tampons and manage it quietly. You're using rags, washing them in communal water sources, and everyone knows when you're unclean. The church considers menstruating women impure. They can't take communion, can't enter certain parts of the church, can't touch holy objects. Your biology is a public announcement of your status. Bathing, when it rarely happens, is communal. Public bathhouses exist in some towns. Large wooden tubs where multiple people soak together in water that's reused until it's basically human soup. There's no gender separation in many cases. You strip naked in front of strangers, share bathwater with them, and accept that this is normal. Privacy around the body is a luxury no one can afford. Children grow up with zero privacy, sleeping in the same room or even the same bed as their parents and siblings. They witness everything: arguments, sex, childbirth, death. There's no sheltering them, no age-appropriate boundaries. They see life raw and unfiltered from birth, which either toughens them or traumatizes them. Probably both. Even death isn't private. When someone dies, they die at home, in the shared room, surrounded by family and neighbours who come to pray and witness. The body is washed and prepared in full view. The wake happens right there in the cottage. You eat meals steps away from your dead relative's corpse while people come to pay respects. The boundary between life and death is porous, constantly crossed, impossible to avoid. You lie on your straw mattress, listening to 6 people breathe, snore, mutter, and shift in their sleep. Someone passes gas, someone else coughs wetly. You stare at the dark ceiling and realise you'll never have a moment to yourself. Never a quiet room where you can think your own thoughts without someone asking what you're doing. Never a locked door. Never a secret that stays secret. Your entire existence is public, observed, and judged. And you have 5 more days to survive in this fishbowl of medieval life. By your 5th day, you've learned to keep your head down, your mouth shut, and your opinions to yourself. But today, during the midday break in the fields, someone makes a mistake. A young man, barely 20, exhausted and hungry, mutters something about the priest's sermon from Sunday. He questions why God would allow such suffering if he truly loved his children. It's barely a whisper, more thinking aloud than actual heresy. But 3 people hear him, and that's enough. The conversation stops dead. People step away from the young man like he's contaminated. Someone crosses themselves. An older woman hisses a prayer. You watch, confused, as the young man's face goes pale with realization. He's just committed one of the most dangerous acts possible in medieval Europe. He's questioned the faith. And in a world where religion isn't just belief but the entire framework of reality, law, and social order, Questioning the faith is questioning everything. Within an hour, the priest knows. By evening, the whole village knows. The young man is summoned to the church, not invited, summoned. And you watch from a distance as he walks there with the gait of the condemned prisoner. The priest speaks to him for a long time behind closed doors. When the young man emerges, his face is tear-streaked and his hands are shaking. He's been given penance, hours of prayer, fasting, public confession of his doubt. If he's lucky, it ends there. If he's not, if the priest deems his heresy serious enough, it goes higher, to the bishop, to the inquisitors. You didn't know the Inquisition was already active, but it is, established in the early 1200s to combat heresy. It operates with terrifying efficiency and zero oversight. Inquisitors travel from town to town investigating reports of heretical belief. Anything from questioning church doctrine to practicing folk magic to simply being too educated for your own good. The process is designed to extract confessions. Torture is permitted, even encouraged, and once you're accused, proving your innocence is nearly impossible because the standards of evidence are whatever the Inquisitor decides they are. Historians still debate the exact numbers of people executed for heresy. Estimates range from thousands to tens of thousands over several centuries, but the fear is universal. Everyone knows someone who was investigated. The threat hangs over the population like a sword, keeping everyone in line, keeping questions unasked, keeping blind faith the only safe option. The religions tolerated are severely limited. You're Catholic or you're dead. Judaism is barely tolerated in some regions, heavily persecuted in others, with Jews forced to wear identifying badges and live in segregated areas. Muslims in Spain face Reconquista violence. Any other belief system, paganism, Catharism, Waldensianism, is heresy punishable by death. Even being the wrong kind of Christian is dangerous. Question transubstantiation. Heretic. Suggest the Bible should be in a language people actually speak. Heretic. Think maybe priests shouldn't be wealthy while peasants starve? Definitely heretic. The church controls information with iron grip. The Bible exists only in Latin, which 99% of the population can't read. This isn't accidental. If peasants could read scripture themselves, they might notice that Jesus preached poverty and humility while bishops live in palaces. They might question why they're paying tithes to build enormous cathedrals while their children starve. They might realise the church is a massive wealth extraction system that keeps them poor and powerless. So the Bible stays in Latin, interpreted by priests who explain that suffering is good for your soul and poverty is blessed, and everything you hate about your life is actually part of God's perfect plan. You attend Mass on Sunday, attendance is mandatory, and absence is noted and punished. The service is in Latin, which you don't understand. The priest chants words that sound like magic spells. You stand when everyone stands, kneel when everyone kneels. Mouth prayers you've memorized phonetically without comprehending their meaning. It's ritual without understanding. Faith without choice. Belief enforced by social pressure and the very real threat of violence. The sermon is in the local language, at least, and it's terrifying. The priest describes hell in vivid detail, eternal fire, demons with hooks tearing flesh that regenerates so it can be torn again, unending agony with no hope of relief. And who goes to hell? Basically everyone who isn't perfectly obedient. Misconfession? Hell. Have impure thoughts? Hell. Question church authority? Definitely hell. The message is clear, obey or suffer forever, but heaven isn't much better in the priest's description. You'll spend eternity praising God, which sounds exhausting, and your reward for a lifetime of suffering is more subordination, just in a nicer location. There's no mention of rest or peace or joy, just endless worship. It doesn't sound appealing, but you don't dare say that because criticism of heaven is criticism of God, which is heresy. The church's power extends beyond the spiritual. It owns roughly 1/3 of all land in Europe. It collects tithes, 10% of your income, even when you're starving. It operates its own court system that can try and punish clergy for crimes, ensuring priests are essentially above secular law. A priest commits murder. He's tried in church court where punishments are lenient. You steal bread to feed your family. Secular court. Brutal punishment. Church courts also handle moral crimes, adultery, blasphemy, heresy. The punishments are public and designed to humiliate. A woman accused of adultery might be paraded through town wearing only a shift, or forced to stand in the church doorway holding a candle while everyone files past judging her. A man who blasphemed might be branded or have his tongue cut out. Justice is performative, meant to reinforce social norms and terrify potential transgressors. You witness a punishment that week, a man accused of practicing magic, really just knowing some herbal remedies his grandmother taught him, is tied to a post in the village square. The priest reads his crimes while villagers gather. Children are brought specifically to watch and learn what happens to heretics. The man is flogged, 20 lashes that leave his back hamburger meat. Then he's forced to publicly recant his devil worship and beg forgiveness from God and the church. He does, sobbing, because the alternative is being burned alive. That's not hyperbole. Burning is the standard execution for unrepentant heretics. You're tied to a stake, wood is piled around you, and fire is lit while you scream. If the executioner is merciful, you're strangled first. If not, you burn conscious, and it takes minutes to die. The smell, witnesses report, is unforgettable. The screaming haunts people for years, but it happens regularly enough that communities become almost numb to it. The fear permeates everything. You learn to guard your words, to nod along even when the priest says things that make no sense, to perform faith whether you feel it or not. You attend every mass, confess regularly, cross yourself at appropriate times, and never, ever question. Because the moment you question, you're suspect, and being suspect can destroy your life or end it. One night, someone whispers to you in the dark cottage. They heard you're educated, from somewhere far away. They have questions about God, about why suffering exists, about whether the church is really necessary for salvation. You freeze. This is a test, or a trap, or just someone desperate for answers. Any response you give is dangerous. You pretend to be asleep. The questions stop. You never find out who asked, and you never want to know. Some ignorance is protective. The weight of religious control is suffocating. Every aspect of life is monitored through a theological lens. The fear of hell is real and constant. And the worst part? You can't even think rebellious thoughts safely because you'll have to confess them. And confession means the priest knows, and the priest can destroy you. Your mind isn't your own, your soul isn't your own. Everything belongs to the church, and resistance means fire. On the 6th morning, you're dragged from sleep by shouting in the village square. Everyone rushes outside, entertainment is rare, and public disturbances draw crowds like medieval reality television. What you see makes your stomach turn. 2 people are locked in wooden stocks, a man and a woman, their heads and hands trapped between heavy planks, bent at an awkward angle that must be agonizing. A crowd has already gathered, and they're not sympathetic. The man, you learn, was caught stealing. Not a horse or gold, nothing dramatic. He stole a loaf of bread from the baker because his children were starving. The woman gossiped about the Lord's wife, suggesting she'd been unfaithful. Both crimes, in medieval logic, deserve public punishment. The stocks are just the beginning. The bailiff reads the charges in a loud voice, ensuring everyone hears. This is performative justice, not meant to rehabilitate, but to humiliate, to hurt, and to terrify everyone watching into compliance. The punishment for theft isn't prison time or community service. It's mutilation. The bailiff produces a hatchet, worn and stained dark with what you hope is rust but suspect is old blood. The crowd presses closer. Children are lifted onto shoulders for a better view. The thief's hand is placed on a wooden block. He's begging now, promising he'll never steal again, swearing on his children's lives, on the Virgin Mary, on anything holy. The bailiff ignores him. One swing and the hand is severed at the wrist. Blood sprays in an arc that seems impossible from a human body. The man screaming is inhuman, high-pitched and desperate. Someone cauterizes the stump with a red-hot iron, and the smell of burning meat fills the air. People around you don't look away. This is normal. This is justice. The thief will probably die from infection within a week, even if he survives. He's ruined. He can't work with one hand. He can't provide for his family. He'll become a beggar. And begging is itself a crime in many places, which means more punishment. A spiral that ends in starvation or the gallows. His crime was trying not to starve. His punishment ensures he will. Medieval justice operates on principles that seem insane to your modern mind. Punishments are public, brutal, and disproportionate. The goal isn't correction, but deterrence and social control. Historians still debate whether medieval justice systems were more or less violent than later periods, but witnessing it firsthand removes all academic distance. This is state-sanctioned torture designed to terrorize a population into obedience. The woman in the stocks receives different punishment. She's fitted with a scold's bridle, an iron cage that fits over her head with a bit that presses down on her tongue, sometimes spiked to cause bleeding if she tries to speak. She'll wear this for hours, possibly days, displayed in the square while people mock her. Women who talk too much, who gossip, who criticize their husbands or neighbours, they get the bridle. It's gendered punishment that enforces silence and submission. You watch her eyes, wide with humiliation and pain. Saliva drips from the cage because she can't swallow properly. The bit prevents her from closing her mouth. Children throw mud at her and adults laugh. This is entertainment. This is a community event. And the message is clear. Speak out of turn and this happens to you. Trial procedures, when they exist, are absurdities. There are no lawyers for common people, no presumption of innocence. Accusations often serve as evidence. If multiple people say you did something, you probably did it, regardless of truth or motive. Witnesses can be coerced or bribed. The judge is usually the lord or his representative, who has vested interest in finding you guilty because fines and confiscated property go to him. For serious crimes or uncertain cases, there's trial by ordeal. You're forced to carry a red-hot iron or plunge your hand in boiling water, or be thrown into a river. If you're innocent, God will protect you. The burns will heal cleanly. You'll float proving your purity, whatever. If you're guilty, you'll sink, or the burns will fester, or you'll die. It's all the same to the court. Trial by ordeal was officially banned by the Church in 1215, but local practices continue for decades in some regions, and the logic behind it, that divine intervention reveals truth, persists in other forms. Trial by combat is another option, mostly for nobility but occasionally filtering down. If you're accused, you can challenge your accuser to a fight. Whoever wins was right, according to God's judgment. This obviously favours the strong over the truthful, but that's medieval justice. Might makes right, quite literally. Punishments vary by crime, but they're universally harsh. Murder gets you hanged, often after torture. Rape is technically illegal, but rarely prosecuted unless the victim is high status. Theft, as you just witnessed, means mutilation or hanging depending on the value stolen. Arson gets you burned alive. Poetic justice taken literally. Treason or plotting against the Lord means being drawn and quartered. a process so horrifying you can't bear to think about it in detail. For lesser crimes, there are creative punishments designed to shame. Bakers who sell underweight bread are dragged through town in a cart while people pelt them with their own bread. Brewers who water down ale are dunked repeatedly in the village pond. Prostitutes are stripped and whipped through the streets. Every punishment is public. Every humiliation is witnessed. Because justice isn't about the individual, it's about sending a message to everyone watching. Prisons barely exist as you understand them. There's no rehabilitation, no serving your time and rejoining society. Prison is where you wait for trial or punishment. Nothing more. Actual incarceration as punishment is rare because it's expensive. Why feed someone when you can just fine them, mutilate them, or kill them? The concept of proportional punishment doesn't exist. Stealing a chicken can get you hanged. Speaking against the Lord can get you tortured. The severity depends on the judge's mood, the political climate, how much the Lord needs to make an example of someone. There's no consistency, no appeals process, no higher authority to petition unless you can somehow reach the king, which you can't. You watch as the thief is cut down from the stocks, his stump wrapped in filthy cloth, and he's dragged away by family who are weeping. His life is over. The woman in the bridle will stay there until sunset, and then she'll be released with the warning that next time will be worse. What's worse than this? You can't imagine, but you don't want to find out. That evening in the cottage, no one speaks about what you witnessed. It's too common to remark on. Justice was done, order maintained, and life continues. But you can't stop thinking about it. The casual brutality, the entertainment value assigned to suffering, the complete absence of mercy or nuance. You think about your own world's justice system, flawed, often unfair, weighted against the poor, but at least there are lawyers, appeals, standards of evidence, and the theoretical possibility of fair treatment. Here, there's nothing, just power, fear, and pain administered publicly to keep everyone terrified into compliance. You have 4 days left, and you're starting to understand that the physical hardships, the hunger, the labour, the filth, are almost easier to bear than the psychological weight of living under systems designed to crush any hint of autonomy or dignity. You wake on the 7th morning to a silence that feels wrong. The usual sounds, chickens, the distant lowing of cattle, people moving about, are muted, and there's a strange quality to the light filtering through the shutters. You push yourself up from the straw and immediately notice your breath misting in the air. Overnight, the temperature has plummeted. Winter has arrived early, and you're catastrophically unprepared. The old woman is already awake, wrapped in every piece of fabric she owns, feeding the last precious sticks of wood into the hearth. The fire is pathetic, barely enough heat to warm your hands if you hold them directly over the flames. She sees you watching and shakes her head. The wood stores are low, the harvest was poor, winter is here and it's going to be a killer. You step outside and the cold hits you like a physical blow. Your thin wool tunic, adequate for autumn, is laughably insufficient now. The wind cuts through the fabric and straight into your bones. Your teeth start chattering immediately. Around the village, people are moving slowly, hunched against the cold, their faces already showing the gaunt desperation of those who know what's coming. Medieval winters kill people. Not sometimes, regularly, predictably, inevitably. The combination of cold, hunger, and disease created a perfect storm of mortality that culled populations every year. Historians estimate that death rates spike dramatically in winter months, particularly among the very young, the old, and anyone already weakened by malnutrition or illness. You're about to experience why. The first problem is warmth. Your cottage has no insulation, no double-paned windows, no central heating. The walls are wattle and daub, woven sticks plastered with mud and dung, which provides some protection but nowhere near enough. Cold air seeps through gaps in the construction. The floor is dirt that radiates cold upward. The roof leaks. When snow comes, and it will, you'll wake up with frost on the inside of the walls and ice in the water bucket. The hearth is your only heat source, and fuel is desperately scarce. Trees belong to the Lord. Cutting them without permission is poaching, punishable by mutilation or death. You're allowed to gather fallen branches, but so is everyone else, and the nearby forest has been picked clean. Some families burn dry dung, which provides minimal heat and fills the cottage with acrid smoke that makes your eyes water and your lungs burn. Others burn straw, which combusts fast and provides even less warmth. You're assigned to the wood-gathering party, a group of villagers who venture into the forest looking for anything burnable. You walk for hours in inadequate shoes, your feet going numb, searching for dead wood that probably doesn't exist. Every tree that falls naturally gets claimed within hours. You're competing with neighbouring villages for the same limited resources. And sometimes those competitions turn violent. A man in your group mentions that last winter someone was killed over a fallen oak. The killer was never found. Justice cares less in winter. The forest is terrifying in winter. The trees are skeletal, stripped of leaves, creating a maze of shadows and strange sounds. Snow begins falling, light at first, then heavier, covering the ground and making it treacherous. Someone slips and twists an ankle. They're helped back to the village, but everyone knows a twisted ankle in winter can mean death. If you can't work, you can't eat. If you can't gather fuel, you freeze. You return with almost nothing. A few handfuls of twigs, some pine cones, a single branch too green to burn well. It's divided among the families, and your share wouldn't keep you warm for an hour. That night, everyone huddles together for warmth. The collective body heat helps, but it's not enough. You wear every piece of clothing you own. Wrap yourself in the thin blanket that's more whole than fabric, and still you shiver violently. Sleep is impossible. You drift in and out of consciousness while your body fights to maintain core temperature. The second problem is food. Winter means no fresh vegetables, no grain growing in fields, no grazing for animals. You're entirely dependent on stores laid up during harvest, and those stores are inadequate. The pottage becomes thinner, more water, less grain. The bread rations shrink. Meat disappears entirely because killing livestock now means no breeding stock in spring, which means starvation next year. You're caught in an impossible calculation. Eat now and possibly die later. Or don't eat now and definitely die sooner. Hunger in winter isn't the mild discomfort of skipping lunch. It's a constant, gnawing presence that dominates every thought. Your body, trying to stay warm in extreme cold, burns calories you're not consuming. You start losing weight rapidly. Your ribs become visible. Your face hollows out. Your strength evaporates. Simple tasks, hauling water, feeding animals, become ordeals that leave you gasping and dizzy. Children suffer worst. Their small bodies can't maintain heaters effectively. You watch a toddler in the cottage next door grow listless. Stop crying, barely move. The parents know what's happening but can't stop it. There's no food to give, no warmth to provide. The child dies quietly one night, and the parents don't even have energy to weep properly. They wrap the tiny body in rags and wait for the ground to thaw enough for burial. Historians still debate exact infant mortality rates in medieval winters, but the evidence suggests it was catastrophic, possibly 30 to 40% in severe winters. The elderly vanish too. The old woman in your cottage grows weaker daily. She stops eating her portion, giving it to the children instead. It's a slow suicide, culturally accepted, expected even. When you're too old to work and food is scarce, you stop taking resources from those who might survive. One morning she doesn't wake up. No one is surprised. Her body joins the child's, waiting for spring burial. Disease thrives in winter. Respiratory infections spread through the close quarters where everyone huddles for warmth. Tuberculosis, influenza, pneumonia, they move through the population, killing indiscriminately. You develop a cough that won't stop, your chest aches, you're feverish again, but there's no barber surgeon this time, he's dead too. Succumb to the same winter plague, killing everyone else. The village starts to smell like death even before people die. Unwashed bodies in close quarters. Chamber pots that can't be emptied properly because the ground is frozen. The sweet, sick smell of infection and disease. You stop noticing after a while. Your nose adjusts or gives up, and everything becomes background horror. Frostbite claims extremities, fingers, toes, noses. They turn white, then black, then fall off or require amputation. A man loses 3 fingers to frostbite and can't work anymore. His family faces starvation. A child loses both feet and will never walk properly again, assuming they survive. There's no treatment beyond amputation and prayer, and often the amputation kills you anyway through shock or infection. Water becomes a crisis. The well freezes. Rivers and ponds ice over. You're breaking ice to get water that's so cold it hurts your teeth to drink. Hauling water in freezing temperatures with numb hands means frequent spills and wasted effort. Dehydration becomes a problem even though you're surrounded by frozen water. The days are short, barely 8 hours of weak daylight, and the sun when it appears provides no warmth. You work in semi-darkness, trying to accomplish tasks that are already difficult and now nearly impossible. Nights last forever. 16 hours of cold and darkness with nothing to do but huddle and hope you see morning. Animals die en masse. Chickens freeze in their coops. The ox, already thin, grows skeletal and weak. If it dies, the spring planting becomes impossible. But feeding it means less for humans. Another impossible choice. You watch people make calculations no one should have to make. Let the animal starve and lose your livelihood, or feed it and let your children starve. By the end of week 1 of winter, which is only your 2nd week in medieval times, the village population has noticeably decreased. 3 children dead, 2 elderly, 1 man who simply didn't wake up, his body frozen solid by morning. The survivors are walking corpses, gaunt and hopeless, counting the weeks until spring and knowing many won't make it. You're barely surviving. Your body fat is gone. Your muscles are consuming themselves. You're weak, sick, and so cold you've forgotten what warmth feels like. And this is just the beginning. Winter lasts months. 4, 5, sometimes 6 months of this relentless cold and hunger. You have days left in your hypothetical week, and you're not sure you'll survive them. On the 8th morning, you wake to screaming, not the usual sounds of village life. This is different, urgent, terrified. You stumble outside, weak from hunger and cold, and see people running toward the edge of the village. Someone is shouting a word you don't recognize at first. Then it registers. Plague. The Black Death has arrived, and your medieval nightmare just became exponentially worse. The first victim is a farmer who returned from the market town 3 days ago. He'd been feeling ill. Fever, chills, headache. Symptoms everyone attributed to winter sickness. But this morning his wife found the buboes. Swellings in his armpits and groin. Blackish purple and grotesque. The size of eggs. He's delirious with fever. Vomiting blood. And the smell coming from his cottage is indescribable. A sweet, rotting stench that makes your stomach heave. Panic spreads faster than the disease. People who were in contact with the farmer flee to the opposite side of the village. His wife and children are abandoned, left to care for him alone because no one else will risk exposure. The priest is summoned, but even he hesitates at the doorway. making the sign of the cross repeatedly before entering to administer last rites. The farmer will be dead within 3 days. Plague kills with terrifying efficiency, roughly 50 to 70% mortality rate for bubonic plague. Higher if it becomes pneumonic and spreads through coughing. You don't understand germ theory? No one here does. Bacteria won't be discovered for another 400 years. Instead, people believe plague is caused by bad air, miasma, or divine punishment for sin, or a configuration of planets, or Jews poisoning wells. The explanations are wrong, but the fear is absolutely justified. Plague is devastating. The Black Death killed somewhere between 75 and 200 million people across Eurasia in the 14th century. Historians still debate the exact numbers, but even conservative estimates suggest it wiped out 30 to 60% of Europe's population. The village's response is a chaotic mix of superstition and desperate pragmatism. The sick man's cottage is marked with a cross painted in lamb's blood, a warning to stay away. People start wearing sachets of herbs around their necks, believing strong smells ward off bad air. Through lavender, wormwood, anything pungent becomes valuable. Doctors, if they existed here, would wear those famous beaked masks stuffed with aromatic herbs. But there are no doctors in your village, just terror and prayer. Religious fervour intensifies. The priest leads processions through the village, everyone chanting prayers and begging God's mercy. Some people whip themselves, flagellants who believe physical suffering will appease divine wrath. You watch a man stripped to the waist in freezing temperatures and lash his own back with a knotted rope until blood flows. Others join him. The priest doesn't stop them. Desperation makes people do things that would seem insane in normal times. But these aren't normal times. By day 2, 3 more people show symptoms. A child develops buboes behind her knees. A young mother starts coughing blood. Pneumonic plague, even deadlier, transmitted through the air with every breath she takes. An old man develops gangrene in his fingers as the infection causes tissue death. The village is transforming into a death camp, and there's nowhere to run. Neighbouring villages won't accept refugees from a plague town. The roads are patrolled. You're trapped here with the dying. The symptoms are horrific beyond anything your modern mind prepared you for. The buboes swell until they're the size of apples, hard and hot to the touch, agonizingly painful. They sometimes burst, leaking pus and blood that smells like rotting meat. Victims develop black patches on their skin as blood vessels rupture, hence Black Death. They vomit uncontrollably. They develop high fevers that cause delirium and hallucinations. They scream in pain that nothing alleviates. And then, usually within 3 to 7 days of first symptoms, they die. Treatment options are worthless. The barber surgeon, if he were still alive, might try lancing the buboes to drain them, a procedure that causes excruciating pain and usually spreads the infection. Some try poultices of crushed garlic or onions applied to the swellings. Others attempt bloodletting, which weakens already dying patients. A few desperate souls try burning the buboes with hot irons. Nothing works. Plague is a bacterial infection requiring antibiotics that won't exist for 600 years. The smell becomes unbearable. Bodies decompose faster when infected with plague, and winter cold only slows the process slightly. The sick emit odours of decay while still living. When they die, their corpses bloat and leak fluids. Burial can't keep pace with death. The ground is still partially frozen, making grave digging nearly impossible. Bodies pile up in a barn on the village outskirts, stacked like firewood, waiting for a mass grave. You try to avoid infection with the limited knowledge you have. You know, though you can't explain why, that you should avoid close contact with the sick, that you shouldn't touch the bodies, that something about the disease spreads from person to person. But in a medieval village where privacy doesn't exist and everyone shares everything, Isolation is impossible. You've already been exposed. You're eating from communal bowls, drinking from shared cups, sleeping in close quarters with people who might be infected but not yet symptomatic. The incubation period is 1 to 7 days. You could be carrying plague right now and not know it. The psychological toll is devastating. You watch children lose parents, parents lose children, entire families wiped out within days of each other. A woman loses her husband, then her 3 children in rapid succession, then succumbs herself. The family's cottage stands empty, door hanging open, belongings untouched because no one will enter a plague house to scavenge. Superstition says the disease lingers in objects, waiting to infect the next victim. Social order collapses. People stop working because what's the point if you're going to die anyway? Fields are abandoned, animals go untended, the mill stops operating because the miller is dead and no one will replace him. Food distribution breaks down. Starvation and plague work together, each making the other worse. Malnourished bodies can't fight infection. Plague victims can't eat, further weakening them. Some people respond with fatalism, eating, drinking, and sinning freely because tomorrow they might be dead. Others become hyper-religious, spending every waking moment in prayer. Still others descend into paranoia, accusing neighbours of spreading plague deliberately, blaming outsiders or minorities. You hear whispers about the Jews again, always the scapegoats, and you're grateful there are no Jewish families in this particular village because you know what happens when plague meets prejudice. Pogroms, massacres, entire communities burned alive. The priest continues holding services, though attendance drops as people either die or grow too afraid to gather in enclosed spaces where plague spreads easily. The church itself smells like death. People bring their sick for healing prayers, and some die right there on the stone floor. The priest looks increasingly haggard, knowing he's likely infected himself through his duties administering last rites and handling the dying. By day 5 of the plague's presence, your 10th day in medieval times, the village population has been cut in half. 15 people dead, 20 more showing symptoms. The survivors are hollow-eyed and traumatized, moving through necessary tasks mechanically, waiting for their turn to develop the telltale fever and swellings. You wake each morning checking your body obsessively. Armpits, groin, neck, anywhere lymph nodes might swell. Your throat hurts, but is it plague or just winter illness? You're feverish, but everyone's feverish from cold and hunger. Every ache becomes potential plague. Every cough from a neighbour makes you flinch. The psychological torture of waiting to see if you'll get sick is almost worse than the disease itself. And then one morning you feel it, a tenderness in your armpit. You reach up and there's a small lump, slightly warm, painful when you press it. Terror floods your system. This is it. You're infected. The plague that's killed half your village is now inside you, multiplying, spreading through your lymphatic system, preparing to kill you in the most agonizing way possible. You don't tell anyone. Not yet. Maybe it's just a swollen lymph node from some other infection. Maybe it's nothing, but you know better. You've seen too many people progress from maybe nothing to definitely plague to dead. Your week in medieval times is about to be cut short by a bacterium called Yersinia pestis, and there's absolutely nothing you can do about it. On the 11th morning, you wake still alive and the lump in your armpit hasn't grown. Maybe you're lucky. Maybe it's not plague after all. But the relief is short-lived because today you learn about another aspect of medieval life that makes survival even more precarious. Childhood, marriage, and the brutal economics of human reproduction. A girl in the village, you'd assumed she was a child, maybe 12 or 13, is being prepared for her wedding. You watch in horror as women fuss over her, fitting a dress that's been worn by countless brides before her, braiding her hair, speaking in hushed, serious tones about what she should expect tonight. She looks terrified. She should be. She's 14 years old, and she's being married to a man in his 30s who already buried one wife in childbirth. This isn't unusual. This is standard practice. Girls marry young in medieval Europe, typically between 12 and 16 for peasants, even younger for nobility where marriage is a political tool. Boys marry slightly older, late teens to early 20s. Once they can support a household, the reasons are grimly practical. Life expectancy is short. Child mortality is catastrophic, and you need to start producing the next generation as soon as biology permits. The wedding ceremony is brief and joyless. The priest mumbles in Latin. The groom looks pleased. He's acquiring a worker, a childbearing vessel, and property rights over a dowry if she has one. The bride looks numb. There's no romance here, no love story. Marriage is an economic arrangement, a labour contract, a breeding programme. Affection might develop over time, or it might not. Either way, it's irrelevant to the institution. After the ceremony, everyone knows what comes next. The consummation isn't private. You remember learning about the lack of privacy. Witnesses accompany the couple to ensure the marriage is legally binding. The bride is 14, the groom is 32. What happens in that room would be called statutory rape in your time. Here it's called marriage, blessed by the church, celebrated by the community. You feel sick watching this, but you're powerless to intervene. Speaking against it would mark you as dangerously radical, possibly heretical. The church endorses these marriages. Canon law sets the minimum age of marriage at 12 for girls, 14 for boys, ages chosen because they roughly correspond to puberty. Once you can physically reproduce, you're ready for marriage in medieval logic. Consent, emotional maturity, and psychological readiness aren't considered. Historians debate whether medieval people understood childhood as a distinct life stage, or if children were simply small adults expected to work and marry as soon as able. The girl's fate is sealed. She'll probably be pregnant within months. Her body, barely finished growing, will be forced to accommodate pregnancy and childbirth. The risks are astronomical. Maternal mortality in medieval Europe hovers around 1 to 2% per birth, which sounds small until you realise women typically have 5 to 8 pregnancies if they survive, across a lifetime. Roughly 1 in 3 women dies from pregnancy-related complications. Those are Russian roulette odds. You watch the village's pregnant women and see the fear in their eyes. There's no prenatal care, no ultrasounds, no understanding of nutrition for pregnancy. You eat what you've always eaten, inadequate grain and little else, while your body tries to build another human. Complications like eclampsia, placental abruption, and hemorrhage are death sentences. Breech births often kill both mother and baby. Twins are especially dangerous. And if something goes catastrophically wrong, there's no emergency C-section. The baby dies inside you, and then you die of sepsis. Childbirth happens at home with midwives who have practical experience but zero medical training. They know traditional positions, breathing techniques, herbs that might ease pain or hasten labour, but they don't know anatomy, don't understand infection, can't perform safe surgical intervention. If labour stalls and the baby won't come, the midwife might try forceps, crude metal instruments that often crush the baby's skull or tear the mother's tissues. Sometimes they perform embryotomy, dismembering the dead fetus inside the mother to extract it piece by piece and save her life. The procedure is as horrific as it sounds. Women labour for hours, sometimes days. The screaming echoes through the village. Everyone knows what's happening. Everyone has heard these screams before. Childbirth is public trauma, witnessed by neighbours who gather to pray, to help, or sometimes just to watch the drama unfold. When the baby finally comes, if both mother and child survive, it's considered a minor miracle. But survival is just the beginning. Infant mortality is staggering. Estimates suggest 20 to 30% of babies die in their first year, and 40 to 50% don't reach age 5. You watch a woman give birth to a son, only to have him die 3 days later for no apparent reason. Sudden infant death syndrome, maybe, or infection, or simply failure to thrive. The mother weeps briefly, then returns to work. She'll be pregnant again within months. It's a numbers game. Have many children. Hope some survive. The children who do survive face a brutal existence from day one. There's no concept of a carefree childhood. By age 5 or 6, children are working, watching younger siblings, gathering eggs, pulling weeds, learning trades. By 10, they're doing adult work. By 14, they might be married and starting the cycle again. Play exists, but it's limited. Squeezed between endless tasks. Education is non-existent for peasants. Reading and writing are skills reserved for clergy and nobility. Your children will grow up illiterate, enumerate, knowing only what they learn through oral tradition and direct experience. They'll have no opportunities for advancement, no chance to escape their class. They're born peasants and will die peasants, as will their children, forever. You watch a mother with 6 children, all under 10, and marvel that she's still alive. She looks 50 but is probably 28. Constant pregnancy and breastfeeding have destroyed her body. Her teeth are gone. Pregnancy leaches calcium from bones and teeth. Her hair is thin, her face is haggard. She moves slowly, her body worn out from bearing and raising children in impossible conditions. The children are thin, dressed in rags, barefoot even in cold weather. They fight over food scraps. The oldest, a girl of 9, carries a toddler on her hip while trying to help with cooking. She's already being trained for her future, motherhood, endless labour, early death. The cycle is unbreakable. Sex itself is complicated by church doctrine. You're supposed to have sex only for procreation, only in approved positions, only on approved days. But people are human. They have sex for pleasure, for comfort, for connection. And when pregnancy results, always a risk because contraception is forbidden and largely ineffective, women face danger while men face only the economic burden of another mouth to feed. Contraception exists in primitive forms, herbal abortifacients, barrier methods made from animal intestines, withdrawal, but all are condemned by the church as sinful. Women caught using them face social ostracism or worse. Abortion is murder in church doctrine, punishable by excommunication and potentially execution. So women bear child after child, their bodies breaking down, their chances of death increasing with each pregnancy. You witness a woman go into labour and immediately sense something is wrong. The midwives look worried, the labour goes on too long, the screaming becomes desperate. By nightfall, both mother and baby are dead, hemorrhage, most likely unstoppable bleeding that drains her life in minutes. The husband is left with 4 young children and no wife. He'll remarry within months because he needs someone to care for the children and run the household. The replacement wife will be young, probably a teenager, and the cycle continues. The casual acceptance of child death is perhaps the most disturbing aspect. People mourn, yes, but they also expect it. They don't name babies immediately. You wait to see if they survive before investing emotionally. Historians still debate whether medieval parents loved their children differently because of high mortality, whether emotional detachment was a protective mechanism. But watching a mother bury her 3rd infant and return to daily tasks with dry eyes suggests either profound strength or psychological damage you can't begin to imagine. Your hypothetical week is almost over, and you've witnessed the full brutal cycle of medieval life. Birth in agony, childhood cut short, marriage as economic transaction, pregnancy as mortal danger, and death arriving early and often. The girl married today will probably be dead by 30, worn out by childbearing. Her children will face the same fate, and nothing ever changes. On the 12th day, you're still clinging to survival. though your body is failing in ways that seem impossible to endure. But today the village offers a distraction from plague and hunger, entertainment, or what passes for entertainment in medieval times. A travelling group has arrived, a minstrel, a juggler, and most disturbingly, a cart carrying a prisoner bound for execution. This, you realise with creeping horror, is what people do for fun. The execution is scheduled for midday in the village square, and everyone is expected to attend. Not invited, expected. Executions are communal events, part civic duty and part spectacle. Missing one suggests sympathy for the criminal, which makes you suspect, so you join the crowd gathering around a hastily constructed gallows. A simple wooden frame with a noose dangling in the cold wind. The prisoner is a young man, maybe 25, accused of a highway robbery. He didn't kill anyone, just stole from a merchant travelling through the region. The penalty is death by hanging. There's no appeal, no last-minute reprieve, no questioning whether this punishment fits the crime. The Lord's justice has spoken, and justice here means performance. The bailiff reads the charges while the condemned man stands on a cart beneath the noose. His hands are bound. He's shaking from cold or terror, probably both. The priest offers final prayers, shouting in Latin that no one understands. The crowd is oddly festive. Children sit on parents' shoulders for a better view. People are eating bread, passing around ale, treating this like a sporting event. The noose goes around the man's neck. The bailiff asks if he has final words. The prisoner tries to speak, but his voice breaks. He manages to proclaim his innocence. They all do, and begs for mercy. The crowd is unmoved. The cart is pulled away and the man drops. But the drop isn't long enough to break his neck cleanly. Instead, he dangles, kicking and choking, his face turning purple while the crowd watches. It takes 5 minutes for him to die. 5 eternal minutes of struggling and strangling while people comment on his performance like critics reviewing a play. You want to look away, but you can't. Everyone is watching, and not watching would mark you as weak or subversive. So you stand there, stomach churning, watching a human being die slowly for the crime of being desperate and hungry. When he finally stops twitching, some people applaud. Children ask questions about why his tongue is sticking out. This is education, showing the young what happens to criminals, normalising violence, enforcing social order through public murder. Historians still debate whether medieval people were genuinely more comfortable with violence, or if this acceptance was socially constructed. But the evidence of your eyes suggests violence is so common that it barely registers. Life is brutal. Death is everywhere. One more corpse dangling from a rope is Tuesday. After the execution, the entertainment continues. The minstrel sets up in the square, a travelling performer who goes from village to village singing songs, telling stories, and spreading news. This is your news source, your entertainment, your connection to the wider world all in one package. No newspapers, no internet, no television. Just this one man with a lute and a repertoire of songs you've heard a dozen times already because new material is rare. He sings ballads about knights and ladies, epic tales of battles and romance that bear no resemblance to your reality. The songs glorify war, celebrate noble deeds, and paint a picture of medieval life that's complete fantasy. The peasants listening know it's fantasy, they're not stupid, but it's escapism. For a few minutes they can imagine a world where heroes exist, where good triumphs, where their suffering has meaning in some grand narrative. It's the medieval equivalent of Hollywood, and just as divorced from reality, between songs, the minstrel shares news. A war is brewing between neighbouring lords. Taxes will increase to fund it. There's plague in the next county, you already knew that. You're living it. A comet was seen last month, which probably means divine judgment is coming. The news is a mix of fact and superstition, impossible to separate, delivered with dramatic flair designed to entertain rather than inform. The juggler performs next, tossing wooden balls and daggers with practiced skill. The crowd enjoys this, simple visual entertainment that requires no literacy or complex thought. Children laugh when he pretends to drop a knife. Adults applaud when he completes a difficult pattern. This is as sophisticated as entertainment gets for peasants. No theatres, no concerts, no museums, just occasional travelling performers offering brief respite from grinding monotony. But the primary entertainment for medieval peasants is watching other people suffer. Public punishments, executions, humiliations, these are the spectacles that draw crowds. You remember the man who lost his hand for stealing? The woman in the scold's bridle? Those weren't just punishments, they were shows. And people enjoy them with the same enthusiasm modern audiences bring to movies or sports. The church provides another form of entertainment, religious festivals and feast days. These break up the year with celebrations that involve somewhat better food, no work, and communal activities. You haven't experienced one yet in your truncated week, but you see the calendar marked saints' days, holy days, festivals celebrating harvests or religious events. On these days, people might drink more, dance awkwardly to simple music, play crude games. It's not much, but it's something. For children, entertainment is even more limited. They play simple games, tag, hide and seek, games with rocks or sticks. Toys barely exist. A lucky child might have a rag doll or a wooden horse carved by a parent. Mostly they entertain themselves by imitating adult work or running around until exhausted. The concept of childhood as a time for play and learning is absent. Children are small workers who occasionally have energy to burn. Adults have even fewer options. After working from sunrise to sunset, there's no energy for elaborate entertainment. Some men gather at the alehouse, a cottage where weak beer is sold, to drink and complain about life. Women gather to spin wool or do other handwork, gossiping while their hands stay busy because idle hands are sinful. Both sexes tell stories. The same stories repeated endlessly because there's nothing new. Oral tradition preserves history, morality tales, and folklore, passed down through generations of people who can't read or write. Sexual entertainment exists, though it's frowned upon. Prostitution thrives despite church condemnation. Travelling prostitutes follow armies and merchant routes, offering services in exchange for money or food. Local women sometimes supplement income through sex work, risking punishment if caught but desperate enough to try. Men visit them despite the sin, because human sexuality doesn't stop just because the church forbids pleasure. Music exists, but it's simple. Folk songs sung while working, religious hymns in church, the occasional travelling minstrel. Instruments are rare and expensive. Most music is vocal, rhythmic, designed to make labour more bearable. You hear people singing while they work, the same verses repeated until they lose all meaning. Just sound to fill the silence. Dancing happens during festivals, simple group dances with basic steps everyone knows. It's one of the few socially acceptable physical expressions of joy. But even dancing is regulated. Too much enjoyment suggests sinfulness. The church warns against excessive merriment. You're supposed to be sombre, contemplative, focused on salvation rather than earthly pleasure. Gambling exists in crude forms, dice games, betting on outcomes of fights or contests. The church condemns gambling as sinful, but people do it anyway, wagering small amounts they can't afford to lose. It's another escape. Another way to imagine that fortune might change even though it never does. The afternoon's entertainment concludes with a fight between two men over an insult someone overheard. They brawl in the mud while the crowd forms a circle and cheers. No one intervenes. Violence is entertainment. The fight ends when one man can't continue, blood streaming from his broken nose. The victor gets applause. The loser gets mockery. Tomorrow they'll both be in the fields working side by side, the fight forgotten or transformed into a story told for entertainment. You return to your cottage as darkness falls, and you realise this is your life if you stayed here. Work until exhausted, eat inadequate food, sleep poorly, and occasionally watch someone die or suffer for a brief break from monotony. No books, no movies, no music worth mentioning, just grinding survival punctuated by violence and religion. The bleakness is suffocating. Modern boredom, scrolling your phone with nothing to watch, is luxury beyond imagination here. On the 13th morning, your final day in this hypothetical medieval week, you wake and take inventory of everything that's gone wrong. Your hands are destroyed, covered in blisters and calluses that will never fully heal. Your back is permanently bent from labour your body wasn't designed for. You've lost at least 15 pounds. Your ribs visible through skin that's caked with dirt you'll never fully wash off in a... The lump in your armpit has stabilised. Maybe it wasn't plague after all. Or maybe you're one of the lucky survivors, but you're weak, feverish, and coughing blood into rags that no one will wash. You step outside and count the changes. The village that housed maybe 60 people when you arrived now holds 35. 25 dead in less than 2 weeks. Plague, starvation, cold, childbirth, execution, and simple exhaustion. The survivors move like ghosts, hollow-eyed and mechanical, performing tasks because stopping means death. You've become one of them. The shock has worn off. The horror has normalised. This is just life now. Terrible, brutal, short life. You think about everything you've endured and everything you've witnessed. The lack of basic hygiene that would be solved with soap and clean water. The starvation-level diet that persists even when fields are full, because the Lord takes most of the harvest. The clothing that causes constant discomfort and harbours disease. The back-breaking labour that destroys bodies by age 40. The feudal system that extracts every ounce of value from human beings and returns only enough to keep them barely alive. The medical care that's worse than no care at all. The total absence of privacy or autonomy. The religious control that polices even your thoughts. The brutal justice system designed to terrorise rather than rehabilitate. The winter that kills indiscriminately. The plague that kills everyone. The forced marriages of children. The pregnancy death sentences. The entertainment that consists of watching people suffer. Every single aspect of medieval life is designed to make survival nearly impossible. And yet people survived. Your ancestors survived. They lived through this hell for generations, slowly, incrementally building the world that would eventually allow you to exist in comfort they couldn't imagine. The printing press would democratize knowledge. The Reformation would challenge church authority. The Enlightenment would introduce concepts like human rights and individual liberty. The Industrial Revolution would end subsistence farming. Modern medicine would make childbirth survivable and plague treatable. But all of that is centuries away. Right now, you're trapped in the before times, when life was nasty, brutish, and short. You realise why you wouldn't last a week in medieval times. Not because you're weak, you've proven you can endure more than you thought possible, but because knowing what's possible makes the reality unbearable. You know that food doesn't have to taste like cardboard. You know that water can be clean, that clothes can be comfortable, that medicine can heal, that justice can be fair, or at least fairer. You know that childhood should be protected, that women shouldn't die in childbirth, that people shouldn't be tortured for entertainment. You carry knowledge of a better world, and that knowledge makes living in this one psychological torture on top of the physical suffering. The medieval people around you don't have that burden. They don't know life can be different. They accept suffering as God's will, as natural order, as simply the way things are. Their expectations are calibrated to their reality. They find joy in moments you'd consider barely tolerable. A slightly larger piece of bread, a sunny day, a child who survives past age 2. Their resilience comes from ignorance of alternatives. And maybe that's a mercy. But you can't unknow what you know. You can't unsee the modern world with its flaws and injustices that still pale compared to this. You can't accept that a cut finger might kill you, that speaking freely could get you burned alive, that your children are probably doomed before they're born. The psychological weight of living in medieval times while maintaining modern consciousness would break anyone eventually. Historians romanticize the medieval period sometimes, talking about community, faith, simpler times, and yes, community exists here. Forged by shared suffering and mutual dependence, faith is powerful, providing comfort and meaning in a meaningless existence. Life is simpler in the sense that your choices are limited to survival or death, but the romance is academic fantasy. The reality is dirt, hunger, pain, fear, and early death. Always death, hovering at the margins, waiting to claim you through 1,000 different vectors you can't control or prevent. You watch the sun rise over fields that need ploughing, over cottages that need repair, over lives that need living despite everything. The survivors are already moving, already working, because stopping isn't an option. The feudal machine grinds on, consuming human lives and producing just enough surplus to keep lords comfortable and peasants alive. The system is self-sustaining, self-perpetuating, and seemingly eternal from this perspective. No one can imagine it ending. No one can conceive of a different way to organise society. But it will end. You know, centuries from now. The medieval period will be history studied in climate-controlled classrooms by students who can't imagine living without electricity. The feudal system will collapse, replaced by other systems with their own injustices but also with improvements. Courts with appeals processes, medicine based on science, food security for most people, literacy for everyone. The grinding horror of medieval life will become museum exhibits and academic papers, its reality sanitized through temporal distance. You think about what you'll take from this experience if you could somehow return to your time. Gratitude. Certainly, for antibiotics and anesthesia, for hot showers and soft beds, for food that tastes good and water that won't kill you. Perspective on your own problems, which seem trivial compared to facing plague with nothing but prayer. Respect for your ancestors who survived this and worse, who persisted through conditions you barely endured for 2 weeks. But also anger. Anger that human beings created systems, feudalism, religious tyranny, patriarchal control that caused unnecessary suffering for centuries. Many of the horrors you experienced weren't inevitable consequences of medieval technology. They were choices. The Lord chose to hoard resources while peasants starved. The Church chose to punish doubt rather than address it. Society chose to treat women as breeding stock and children as miniature adults. Different choices were possible even then. They just weren't made because the powerful benefited from the status quo. The day progresses and you go through the motions. You haul water that might be contaminated. You eat pottage that barely sustains you. You work fields you don't own, producing food you won't eat. You avoid the plague cottages where new victims are dying. You attend a brief prayer service where the priest promises suffering now means rewards later. You return to your cottage as darkness falls. Your hypothetical week is ending. In your imagination, some miracle returns you to modern life. You wake up in your own bed, in your own time, with functioning plumbing and a refrigerator full of food. The relief would be overwhelming. You'd probably cry at the sight of a working toilet. You'd marvel at electric lights, at the absence of constant pain, at the luxury of privacy and safety. But part of you would remain here, in the mud and smoke of medieval Europe, haunted by what you witnessed. The faces of children who died too young, the woman who bled to death in childbirth, the man hanged for stealing bread, the plague victims who died in agony while you stood helpless. These aren't historical abstractions anymore. They're people you knew, however briefly. People who suffered and died in a world that gave them no other options. You think about the girl married at 14, probably pregnant by now if she's lucky, possibly dead in childbirth if she's not. You think about the thief missing his hand, starving because he can't work. You think about all the people still here, still suffering, still enduring because they have no choice. And you realise that your week of medieval tourism is their entire life. This isn't a temporary hardship they'll overcome. This is reality until death, which comes early and often. The understanding settles over you like the cold. You wouldn't last a week in medieval times, not because you'd die, though you might, but because you'd lose your mind. The cumulative weight of suffering, injustice, filth, hunger, fear, and hopelessness would crush your modern psyche. You're built for a world with safety nets and second chances, where mistakes aren't fatal and illness isn't a death sentence. Medieval life offers no nets, no chances, and death waits around every corner. As you lie on your straw mattress on this final night, surrounded by sleeping bodies and the smell of unwashed humanity, you count your blessings in reverse. You're grateful for everything you took for granted: clean water, antibiotics, education, freedom of speech, childhood, women's rights, labour laws, weekends, retirement. The concept that life might include joy rather than just survival. You're grateful to live in a time when questioning authority doesn't mean torture, when having a cold doesn't mean death, when being poor doesn't mean being property. The medieval world was hell not because medieval people were worse than modern people, but because they lacked the knowledge, technology, and social structures that make humane existence possible. They did their best with what they had, which was almost nothing. They survived, loved, laughed when they could, found meaning in faith and family. Their strength is undeniable, but strength born from necessity isn't virtue, it's tragedy. You close your eyes, exhausted beyond measure, and let yourself imagine home. Soft sheets, climate control, a kitchen full of food, a bathroom with a door that locks, a world where you can speak freely, pursue education, choose your own path, a world where childhood exists, where women don't die having babies, where illness is treatable and justice attempts fairness. It's not perfect. Your time has its own deep flaws, its own injustices and cruelties. But compared to this, it's paradise. Your week in medieval times ends not with dramatic escape, but with quiet understanding. You wouldn't survive here. Not physically, though that's questionable, but mentally, emotionally, spiritually. The distance between your world and this one is measured not in years, but in unimaginable suffering that built, brick by brick, the civilization you inherited. Every comfort you enjoy was purchased with the misery of ancestors who had no choice but to endure. So honour them, remember them, and never, ever take for granted the miracle of living in a time when survival isn't the only goal, when life can include purpose and pleasure and possibility. Because for most of human history, for the people you've lived among this week, those luxuries were impossible dreams. They suffered so you wouldn't have to. The least you can do is appreciate what they built, even as you work to build something better still. The final thought that carries you into uneasy sleep. Medieval times weren't the worst period of human history. There were darker ages before and after, but they'd represent a baseline of suffering that helps measure progress. The distance from there to here is the distance from nightmare to waking, and waking despite its flaws is always better than the dream. As your consciousness begins to drift, floating somewhere between the medieval past and the present moment, let yourself feel the weight lifting, the The straw beneath you softens into something kinder. The cold air warms. The sounds of laboured breathing and restless sleep fade into gentle quiet. You're leaving this place. This time. This suffering that was never truly yours but felt overwhelming nonetheless. Breathe slowly now. Let your muscles unclench. Those muscles that worked until they screamed, that carried water and pushed ploughs and hauled stones. They're resting now. They're safe. Your hands, blistered and broken in that other time, are smooth again. Your back, bent from labour, straightens. Your stomach, hollow with hunger, fills. The transformation is gradual, merciful, like waking from a nightmare into the soft light of morning. The faces you saw, the dying child, the exhausted mother, the man on the gallows, they recede gently into history where they belong. Not forgotten, never forgotten, but released from their grip on your heart. They lived their lives, endured what they had to endure. And their story is complete. You witnessed it, honoured it by understanding it, and now you can let it rest. The smell of smoke and unwashed bodies fades, replaced by the clean scent of your own time, whatever that smells like to you. Comfort, safety, home. The concepts medieval people could barely imagine are yours again, waiting patiently for you to return and appreciate them with new eyes. Eyes that have seen what came before and understand the precious fragility of progress. Your breathing slows, deepens, becomes the breathing of someone safe in their own bed, in their own time, with tomorrow holding possibility rather than just more suffering. The medieval world releases you completely now, loosening its grip finger by finger, letting you drift back to where you belong. And in the space between sleeping and waking, between past and present, there's only gratitude. Gratitude for hot water and modern medicine, for full plates and soft clothes, for freedom and privacy and the simple miracle of living in a time when survival isn't the only goal. Gratitude for ancestors who endured so you could exist. Gratitude for this moment, right now, safe and warm and breathing easy. The story ends, as all stories do, but you carry it with you now, not as trauma but as understanding, not as horror but as perspective. The medieval world existed. People lived there, loved there, died there. Their struggles built the foundation of everything you know, and now, having walked briefly in their shoes, you understand the weight of that inheritance. Sleep now, rest deeply. Tomorrow is another day in your own miraculous time. A day they could never have imagined. A day that exists because they survived impossible odds and built something better for children they would never meet. Honour them by living fully, by appreciating deeply, by remembering always that comfort is not guaranteed and progress is not permanent. The past releases you, the present welcomes you home, and in the gentle darkness of sleep, you're simply, beautifully, blessedly yourself again. Safe, warm, alive in a time when those things are possible for more people than ever before in human history.